Let's move on to the show itself and touch on something that's very, very serious, to be quite honest with you. Earlier this week, I told you about the New York Times report that New York Jets quarterback Aaron Rodgers was on a VP shortlist to be a running mate for Robert F. Kennedy Jr. RFK Jr., who's running for president as an independent, also has former Minnesota governor and pro wrestler Jesse the Body Ventura on that list as well. But let's talk about Rodgers for a second, whose alleged comments from the past have now come back into focus. That's what happens when you're being considered for the second highest office in the country. That's just the way that it goes. According to a recent CNN report, Aaron Rodgers questioned the validity of the 2012 Sandy Hook school shooting that killed 20 children and 6 adults. CNN says they know of 2 people with whom Rodgers has shared conspiracy theories about the tragedy. One of them is Pamela Brown, who was covering the Kentucky Derby for CNN in 2013 when she was introduced to Rodgers at a post-Derby party. Hearing that she was a journalist with CNN, she says Rodgers immediately began attacking the news media for covering up, quote unquote, important stories. Rodgers brought up the tragic killing of 20 children and 6 adults by a gunman at Sandy Hook Elementary School, claiming it was actually a government inside job and the media was intentionally ignoring it. Another unnamed source attributes the following to Rodgers. Quote, "They're all making it up. They're all actors." The person said Rodgers asserted about the parents of the victims, who they said Rodgers also believed were actors. The New York Jets had no comment on the CNN report, but Rodgers responded by issuing this following statement on X, quote, "As I'm on the record saying in the past, what happened in Sandy Hook was an absolute tragedy. I am not and have never been of the opinion that the events did not take place. Again, I hope that we learn from this and other tragedies to identify the signs that will allow us to prevent unnecessary loss of life. My thoughts and prayers continue to remain with the families affected along with the entire Sandy Hook community," end quote. I will remind you again, 20 children, ages 6 and 7, elementary school children, were murdered, along with 6 adults, bravely trying to save their life, by the way. All were killed at Sandy Hook Elementary School on December 14, 2012. Rodgers may say he has no belief in Sandy Hook conspiracies, but before I get into my opinion, let me tell you, he did recently appear for 3 hours on the Look Into It podcast with Eddie Bravo. And look at the list of just some of the things he discussed on the show in February. Germ therapy and terrain therapy, or terrain theory, the Great Awakening, the U.S. borders, Weekend at Bernie's, Joe Biden, Operation Northwoods, Operation Paperclip, Tesla, Library of Alexandria, Tataria, JFK assassination, list goes on and on. George Soros, the list goes on and on. I know I'm being redundant, but I'm at a loss for words because I don't want to believe this about Aaron Rodgers. I refuse to believe this about Aaron Rodgers because at the end of the day, we're all human beings. And I would like to believe that the most innocent amongst us are children. And to know that they got murdered, and for that to be denied when we've seen the loss of life, we've seen funerals, we've seen parents crying on Capitol Hill, imploring our elected officials to get gun control under control. We've seen all of this. And to have anybody minimize or engage in conspiracy theories to deny something along those lines, it's indecent, it's egregious, and it's unbecoming. And that is not a person that any of us should want to be associated with. And that is not how I feel about Aaron Rodgers. I love me some Aaron Rodgers. I love him as a player. I think he's a phenomenal, phenomenal player, athlete, superstar quarterback. I've had the pleasure of speaking to him on a few occasions. And yes, he is bright. And yes, he is becoming more and more well-read over time. And he has his opinions and stuff like that. You can agree, you can disagree, you can differ or whatever. But up until recently, I've never seen him associated with anything that I would consider indecent. Now, I did not like the fact that he literally intimated that Jimmy Kimmel could be on Jeffrey Epstein's list, but he came on the Pat McAfee show shortly after and explained what he was saying. And he highlighted how Jimmy Kimmel had been attacking him for quite some time. He still went a bit too far in my estimation, but he didn't accuse Jimmy Kimmel of being on the list. He basically intimated that he was cracking jokes at him just like Jimmy Kimmel is known to crack jokes at Aaron Rodgers. Jimmy Kimmel didn't take it that way, and he should not have taken it that way, and that is not something you should joke about. And he said it plain as day, fine. But now there's this. Now for me, in the interest of fairness, I would ask this of the CNN reporter and CNN as a network. Why are we hearing about this just now if this is what transpired in 2013? How is that happening? If you're in the news business, how is something relevant 12 years later when you never mentioned it 12 years ago? I understand that Aaron Rodgers may be a VP running mate of RFK Jr., but he isn't yet. And if he isn't yet, then what would be the reason for bringing this up now? And if you're going to bring this up now, where's the evidence? Because I got news for you. After Aaron Rodgers issued his statement, the burden is on Ms. Pamela Brown. The burden is on CNN. Where's your evidence? You reported allegations of Aaron Rodgers being associated with a conspiracy theory that denies the killings, the murders of elementary school kids in Sandy Hook Elementary School. Where's your evidence? That's where the onus lies now. But if Aaron Rodgers is guilty of such a thing, if the NFL threw his ass out with the bathwater, I wouldn't blame him. If the New York Jets wanted nothing to do with him, I wouldn't blame them. There are certain lines you just don't cross, and that would be crossing the line. I just find it very difficult to believe that Aaron Rodgers would do something like that. Not the person, not the Aaron Rodgers that I've spoken to periodically over the years. I don't see that. I find it very hard to believe, but I don't know. Neither do the rest of us. But the onus is not on Aaron Rodgers now, because he issued his statement. Now the onus is on CNN to show us proof, since you put that story out for the world to see. Period.